Okay. So yesterday we spoke about Bori Priya 8 as well, things that grow on trees. So today maybe we'll have a look at things that grow out of the ground, vegetables, certain what we would call certain fruits, which are actually halachically vegetables. We touched on it yesterday. So for example, bananas. It's very simple. It really is. Actually, you make a bracha Bori Priya Ha'adama, which means things that come out of the ground, and before you eat them. If you've got a selection of different vegetables, the same is true actually with fruits. If you've got a selection of fruits and vegetables, and some of them are whole and some of them are not, then it's better to make a bracha over something which is whole. So let's say, for example, you've got a salad made up of cut up, bits of vegetables, but you've got whole cherry tomatoes in there, then it would be better to make your Bori Priya Ha'adama on the tomato, or tomato. Did I say that right?
Tomato.
No, all right. Okay, so you're better off making a bracha over the tomato.
Tomato.
The tomato.
Tomato's the only way to pronounce it.
Okay, you can say it however you want, but you should make a bracha over it. Right?
Well, it's a meal.
No, not because it's a meal, because inside of brachas, something which is whole has greater importance to it than something which has been cut up. The same is true with fruit as well. So if you've got a whole apple and you've got segments, orange segments on the plate, you should make a Bori Priya 8 over the apple, unless your favorite fruit is orange.
What about stuffed peppers?
What about stuffed peppers?
I
I personally...
It's all about stuffed peppers.
I personally would not make a bracha over stuffed pepper because I don't like them.
What would one make?
What bracha would one make? Good question. It very much depends what it's stuffed with. But very often things over here are stuffed with lots of rice, because that's a way of making sure that you don't put anything of any real worth inside of it. Abroad, you'll get things, be stuffed mostly with meat. Cheese. You have stuffed peppers with cheese?
Stuffed pepper is like a veggie dish.
Where do you come from?
Arizona.
Oh, that explains it. Okay. No, we all have our, crosses to bear. That's
certain foods that you don't have to make a bracha.
Oh, hold on a second. One second. So what I think, what the emphasis, I think with the stuffed pepper, you would probably need to make two brachas, I think.
Yeah.
You would have to make a bracha over the inside and a bracha over the outside. So if you've got a stuffed pepper that's full of stuffed meat, then you would make a Bori Priya Ha'adama over the pepper, and you would make charcoal over the meat. If it was stuffed with rice, then you would make a mazonis over the rice, and you would make a Ha'adama over the pepper. Again, as I mentioned before, I'm not convinced that I would recommend eating stuffed peppers myself, but each to their own. So Bori Priya Ha'adama, again, relatively simple. The after bracha for eating a piece of vegetable is something called Borei Nefashot. Borei Nefashot, Rabot v'Chezronon. It's very simple. It's pretty short. It's, again, you'll notice it's interesting that things work in inverse proportion, which means the more effort went into getting something onto your plate, the longer is going to be the after bracha that you're going to make. Bread, that's Birkat HaMazon. Mizonot, which is things that are made with flour, that's going to be ala michya. And then, when you move into the realms of most fruits and all vegetables, it's going to be Bori Nefashos, which is a sort of much shorter blessing. Again, what's the idea? Fruits and vegetables, as a rule, they don't require very much preparation. You can just pick the apple off the tree, you can pull the cucumber out of the ground and brush it off, and you can eat it. So there seems to be like a relationship between the length of the after bracha and what it is that you're eating.
Shouldn't it be longer?
Sorry?
Should we be showing more gratitude to Hashem for something that was like, it just gives it to us?
Possibly. Yeah. But I think over here, what the idea over here is that we're also working in proportion of what is the importance of what you're eating right now. Which means, again, going back, we don't have to go back very far, go back 100 years or so, meals were eaten with bread. If you're going to sit down and eat a meal, then that was something significant. You ate it with bread, and you would wash and you would make hamotzi. Nowadays, we're very capable of sitting down and eating an enormous meal without washing at all. So we're left with the residue of the brachas that Chazal right? The Anshe Knesset Agdolah, the men of the Great Assembly, going back, 2,000 years plus, that the brachas that they introduced, much, much more than that, 2,400 years. The brachas that they introduced for what has to be said after you eat and before you eat. Just as an interesting idea for those of you who have thought about this, and I'm sure most of you did, and that would explain, the sleepless nights that you've been having. But the early authorities ask an interesting question. When the Jewish people were wandering through the desert, so they ate manna. What bracha was made over manna? Right? Manna had a din of being like bread. However, for example, the Balei Tosfos, the early authorities, they say, well, you can't say Hamoitzi lechem min haaretz because it didn't come out of the ground, it came out from the sky, it came down from the sky each day, right? So they come to the conclusion that the correct bracha to recite over manna is Hamoitzi lechem min hashamayim, right? Who brought the bread down from the shamayim. So just, again, if you ever get given a piece of manna to eat, that you should know what bracha to make over it. That's all, I'm just clarifying. That didn't get any reaction whatsoever, so I guess people imagine that it's something that you can go and order and,
No matter what the taste was?
No matter what the taste was, because it's working on the food itself. Interesting enough, just before we go any further, which actually is in addition to what you just said, that Rav Dessler asks a very simple question. He says, what's a greater miracle, bread that comes out of the sky or bread that comes out of the ground? And he says they're equally miraculous. The only thing that differentiates between the two of them is frequency, that's all, right? We don't look at bread as being a miraculous thing because you can buy bread, you go to the Makolet, you'll buy bread, go to the bakery, you'll buy bread. Over here, they also serve bread. It just happens to be a few days old. We look at it as being something which is just part of our everyday life, so we don't look at it as being particularly miraculous, but the truth of the matter is, you stop and think about it, the food that we eat truly is a gift that's been given to us by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, something that we need to, acknowledge and to be very appreciative of. We really do. So that's vegetables. Again, if you're going to have, we spoke about this yesterday, we might as well speak about it again today, because I don't imagine anyone really remembers what we said yesterday. If you're having a bowl of soup and you've got chunks of vegetables in your soup, then you would have to make two brachas. You would have to make two blessings over there, one over the soup and one over the identifiable pieces of vegetable. So again, if you've got a pureed soup, if you've got a soup that's been through the blender, then you would just make a shahakol because nothing is identifiable anymore, unless you happen to see, the person who blended it, if you happen to see their fingers, bobbing around over there. So you would just make a shahakol, but if you've got a regular vegetable soup with proper bits of vegetables inside of it, then you would definitely have to you would have to make two brachas over there. There was in England, many years ago, there was a very powerful female prime minister called Margaret Thatcher. She ruled for, how long she ruled for? I can't remember, 11 years or something. I mean, she ruled for a long time. And they tell a joke that she once took her cabinet out to take them out for dinner one evening. They went to a restaurant and the waiter comes along and he says, Madam Prime Minister, what can I get you? And she says, I'll have a steak, please, medium rare. And he says, and what about the vegetables? And she says, no, they'll have the same, it's fine. So anyway, that's the... it's interesting. I know this side of the table laughed, and this side of the table is still trying to work that one out.
I missed the end of it.
Huh?
I missed the end of it.
Don't worry, you didn't miss anything by the looks of it. It's fine, really. Oh, okay. I apologise. Really, I can't really do very much about my ethnic upbringing. You can take the Englishman out of England, but you can't take the Englishman out of the Englishman, or England out of the Englishman, whatever it is. Not that there's very much there to begin with, but whatever. Okay. Let's move on to all other kinds of foods and drinks. Yeah.
I had a question about a drink.
Sure, make mine a double.
You would think that water, it gives you life. It's so important. Everyone raves about water. Water, it's so important. But then it gets an ordinary blessing. How come it's not?
Good question.
We're raised in
good
a womb
good
of
question.
Water.
The truth is, I rave about water as well. When I get given water, I'm like, I don't want this. Here, give me something that's got chemicals in it and food colouring, and then I rave and rant and until they bring me something else instead. So you're right. right? Water. But yeah, 100% right. Water is definitely, without water you can't live. Imein mayim, right? It says, the Gemara says that a person can't live for longer than 3 days without drinking water. It's the most basic, the most basic dimension of what we are. Our bodies, if I remember correctly, are 80% water. Something like that. I keep trying to explain to my wife that that's all it is. It's just water. Why you give me a hard time because I'm not fat. I'm just very liquidy. That's all. So it's interesting, right? Why do we make a shackle over water? I'll tell you something else interestingly, which we've spoken. Something I wanted to mention today is that water is the only drink that you can drink without making a blessing over it at all.
Whoa.
Interestingly enough, yes. Thank you for that. That's very apt response. I appreciate it.
So you can drink?
What circumstances?
Under what circumstances? So that halacha says like this, that water, you make a bracha over water when you're thirsty. But if you're not thirsty, then you don't make a bracha over it. What does that mean? Some people, you have to take, people take medication. If you're only drinking the water in order to be able to take the medication, you wouldn't have drunk it otherwise, then you don't make a blessing over the water that you're drinking. That is not so for any other drink that you're going to drink, which means even if you're not thirsty and you're going to have a cup of, apple juice to wash the pills down, you would have to make a bracha over the apple juice. You have to make a bracha over every other single thing that you're going to drink. It requires a blessing, even if you're not thirsty. Water is the only one that requires you to be thirsty in order to make a bracha. Now, for most of us, most of the time that we drink, that's exactly what we are. It's fine. It's great, right?
What does one mean when it's thirsty? How can one consume?
Do you know what? I don't know. I wish you hadn't have asked that question. I really do. How do you define what's thirsty? I think the way we have to define is that you're drinking the water because you want to drink it, and not because you've got an external reason for why you need to drink it, right?
Does that include rehydrating, like if you're exercising?
No, absolutely not. I think quite the opposite, right? When a person has been exercising and they're absolutely parched, then at that moment, the bracha that you're going to make over your water is something that's got tremendous, it's got tremendous importance. The water never tastes any better than when you're really thirsty. And the truth is that when you're really thirsty, it's the only thing that really parches your thirst. Right? I hate to mention this in front of college students who seem to imagine that beer is the only thing that does it. But the only thing that really takes care of an honest to goodness thirst is water, because it's got nothing else in it. Right? Everything else that we put into our water is detracting from the goodness of the water. Why is it that water has a regular blessing to it? So I think the answer is, I think it's a technical thing rather than, it's not suggesting that water is of lesser importance, for example, than wine. But wine is really the only drink that we've got that we make a special blessing over. And over there, the Gemara discusses what the reason is for that, right? It says because it brings you joy and it brings you happiness, and it was something that was offered up as libations in the temple. It's got a different. We try to give it a different kind of a category. It gets a different blessing to enhance the experience of drinking the wine. But if it weren't for what the rabbis say, then we would be reciting shehakol over wine as well, because that's the bracha that's recited over drinks. So again, all drinks, right? So we're talking about juices, we're talking about soft drinks, we're talking about alcoholic drinks, right? They have a shehakol made over them, unless they happen to be wine. And if they've got wine, then you've got to make a borei geffen or fresh grape juice. Now you have to be careful. There's a problem over here when you drink. When you drink juices. Very often juices that are, not juices that are squeezed in front of you, but juices that you buy in the supermarket, sometimes when they've got exotic flavors, they add grape juice into them in order to give them a little bit of body. And grape juice is cheaper, for example, than passion fruit, so they'll add some in just to make it go further. You have to be very careful if you're buying fresh fruit juices from non-kosher sources. You have to be very careful that there's no grape juice inside of what you're drinking. If there's grape juice, just fresh grape juice, it's not been fermented, it's just regular juice that's come out of the grapes, that has a din, it has exactly the same classification as wine, and if it's been prepared by somebody non-Jewish, it can't be drunk. Right, so it's just something to keep an eye out on. Why do I know this? Because a few years ago I was in London, and the kids bought a fruit juice. It was like an exotic fruit juice cocktail from one of the major supermarket chains in London. And I was looking at the ingredients, Baruch Hashem, before they drank it. I was looking at the ingredients. I saw it had grape juice in it, and so you got to be careful. Okay? Just keep an eye out for that. Borei Pri Geffen is going to be recited on again, wine, grape juice, whether it's grape juice that's been made for Kiddush. Some families like to use grape juice rather than wine because they've got little children and they don't want their kids to get drunk. Some people have little children, which is why they make Kiddush on wine, because they want to get drunk. But even just regular non-fermented juice that's come out of the grapes, you would make a Borei Pri Geffen over it as long as it's not diluted by too much. If it's diluted by a certain amount, then at that point it becomes shehakol, and that's why, for example, you can see drinks over here, soft drinks that are sold over here in all of the makolets and all the supermarkets that are grape flavored. They've got a certain amount of grape juice inside of them, but not enough to make it something that you've got to make a Borei Pri Geffen over.
How about medicines?
I'll try that again. You don't make a bracha over medication, because you're taking the medication in order to be able to get well. It's not considered to be a foodstuff. The only thing that might be a exception to the rule, perhaps, is vitamins and certain supplements. Right over there, I would suggest that if you're taking vitamins to avoid the problems, they're considered to be more like food than medication. Halachically, if you're taking vitamins, I would suggest that you take them together with something. So maybe a drink or eat something that's going to make you make a shehakol over it, and then you can take the pill at the same time in order to make sure that you're covering your bases.
Usually you take it with water.
So maybe, again, maybe it's worthwhile being a little bit more careful over here, because there's a question of you're drinking the water in order to take the vitamin, whether you should make a bracha over the water or not. Maybe it would be better to add something into the water just to make sure that you do have to make a bracha. So, for example, you want to drink, coffee, tea, add a little bit of juice into it or something, enough to make sure that you have to make a bracha over what it is that you're drinking in order to be able to take the vitamins. Now, there are a whole slew of different foods that the bracha that's recited over them is the bracha called shehakol. Shehakol niyeh bidvaroi, which is a kind of a generic blessing. It's interesting. Most other blessings, the blessings that we recite over food, except for shehakol, are very descriptive. Right? So if you eat something out of the ground, you say Borei Pri Adama, it came out of the ground. You eat something from a tree, you say Borei Pri Eitz, it came from the tree. Right? When we say shehakol niyeh bidvaroi, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created all these things, it's a generic blessing. It's not defining. It's not describing what we're eating at all, and it's a blessing that's being recited for all the foodstuffs that don't fall into specific categories. So, for example, again, quite a lot of things would be shehakol. But for example, meat. Right, meat would be a shehakol. Cheese would be. Dairy products are mostly shehakol unless they've got something in them which is going to warrant having to make a different bracha over it. Chocolate is shehakol. Again, beverages, like I mentioned before, is shehakol. I'm just trying to think. I'm looking in my fridge right now, trying to see what's in there, and I see that it's pretty bare. So I can't. If you can think of foods, if you want to throw out names of foods, we can work out what bracha is supposed to make over them. But ice cream, you scream. Right, we all scream for ice cream. Ice cream, as a rule, we spoke about it the other day, but ice cream, as a rule, you would make a shehakol over it unless it's got identifiable bits of something inside of it. So if you're eating cherry vanilla ice cream, or you're eating, raisin ice cream, or whatever it is, you might have to make two different blessings over it.
Sushi.
What about?
Pardon?
Sushi.
Sushi is an interesting concoction. And it's a little bit halachically vague, actually, sushi, because it very much depends what it's made with. Personally, I don't eat sushi because I like my fish to be dead. The idea of like watching this thing wriggle around on my plate and gasping for life, and Pardon? Oh, fresh as can be.
What would seaweed be considered?
Seaweed. That's interesting. I think that seaweed, the correct bracha for seaweed would be shehakol, Because even though it's green and looks remarkably vegetable-like, it doesn't grow in the ground.
Technically,
It does.
It does.
In the sea ground.
In the sea ground. You know what? I don't know.
It's an
I
algae.
would say an
It's an algae?
It's an algae.
It's an algae. Right? It's an algae, which means that what? It's probably not even, it's probably not really,
it technically
It's
depends on
symbiotic
the
relationship.
species of seaweed.
oh, so it's not really a vegetable at
It's a
all.
vegetable, even if it grows in the ground.
It's things coming together, joining together.
It's fungi and parasites.
Not all.
Oh, it sounds delicious. Gosh, why don't we have seaweed more often?
It's really just used to hold the sushi together.
It's really good.
It's not
We have seaweed salad. It's delicious.
Yeah, really?
It doesn't sound good. It's not like sushi.
No, you know what they say?
And iodine.
Iodine?
Yeah, so
Ever heard of iodine poisoning?
you live in Chernobyl. It's probably good.
Oh yeah, but you see, you know, the Chernobyl, the electricity bills are very cheap over there because people glow in the dark. They don't need
What about hummus?
hummus. What bracha do you make over hummus? So again, you would make shahakol because the hummus is no longer identifiable. Hummus is chickpeas.
What about the hummus with the chicken?
Oh, so if you've got chickpeas in there, and obviously they're there, you can see them, then you would have to make a bor priadoma over them, right? Separately, right? Because they're two different things over here. Seaweed falafel. Again, falafel you would make. I think you make shahakal over falafel because you can't. It's not identifiable. It's chickpeas that have been mashed up. It's not a fried chickpea.
I have one more question.
Okay, for now. For now.
So like, if you're having like a sandwich for a snack, do you still have to make hamotzi?
Yes, very much so. Once you've got bread, regardless of why you're eating it or how you're eating it, you're going to have to make hamotzi over it. And you're going to have to bench afterwards as well. We spoke about this rather odd era that we live in.
You need to have a certain amount of bread, right? Like more than 2 pita
Oh,
slices or something like that?
No. The 2 pizza slices was to do with pizza, and that was to do with the fact that once you're making yourself a meal, then you're going to have to wash and you're going to have to bench over it. When it comes to bread, even a small amount of bread requires washing your hands, making hamotzi, and benching afterwards as well. When we spoke about pizza, needing 2 pieces of pizza, is because the pizza base itself is a little bit undefined as to what exactly it is. But if you're going to eat enough of it, then you're going to have to bench over it. Just hold on 1 second. Back to sushi. Don't ask me why we're going back to sushi. But what bracha would you make over sushi? I think you would probably need to make at least 2, maybe even 3 brachas. It depends what it's made with. If you've got rice in there, you would have to make a mazonos over the rice. If you've got vegetables, right, very often there are vegetables that go around in the spiral as well, then you would probably have to make ha'adam as long as you can work out what they are. And then there's the fish itself, which is obviously going to take away some of the pleasure of eating sushi because you've got to break it up into bits and pieces and make the bracha separately over each bit before you start eating it. But again, I'm not a big sushi aficionado, but if the rice is only there in order to keep everything bound together, then it could be that you don't have to make a mazonos over the rice. We're back, if you remember the cheesecake, we're back to the cheesecake syndrome, right? Depending on why the base is there. If the base is there in order to hold the contents, then you don't make a bracha over the base, you make a bracha over the contents instead. If the base is an integral part of the cake, then you would make a mazonos over the cake, and that would cover the contents of the cake as well. So again, in sushi, if the rice is only there in order to keep everything together, then it could be that you don't need to make a bracha over the rice, you only have to make a bracha over the fish itself. Yes?
Could you consider it a mixture
And then?
and then make it on the predominant?
Yeah? That's what I'm saying. If the ikar and tefel, which means I think it's the problem with sushi is that the fish is definitely an integral part of what's going on, right? Which means that if the rice is a part of what's going on as well, then you would have to make 2 brachas. The rice won't be able to get rid of the bracha you need to make over the fish because they're equally important. If the fish is what's important and the rice is not important, then you could probably just make a shahakal over it.
I would say that the rice was important.
Good. I mean, you're a sushi eater? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was going to say straight from the horse's mouth, but that's completely inapplicable. Straight from the fish's mouth, right? You're saying that the rice is important, so I guess you would have to make 2 brachas. One of the ways to get around it, actually, is you could take your sushi and you could dip into wasabi, and at that point, it's not edible. You could just eat it, and your whole mouth will be set on fire. Actually, where's our fireman this morning? Where is he? Yeah.
I heard a really weird idea on Shabbat.
Oh, good.
You know how you're apparently supposed to eat a certain amount of challah or something like that?
You're supposed to eat a kazayas of challah. No, it's not very much, in order to be able to bench. Right? Not very. Talking about maybe half of a regular slice of challah is probably enough to get you into the obligation of having to bench. There is a fascinating halacha. It's interesting. Foods. So you eat food, you've got to make a bracha at the beginning. In order to be able to make an after bracha at the end, you've got to have eaten a certain amount of it. And it goes according to volume. And how much mazonis did you eat? Depends on whether you have to make an after blessing. How much shehakol did you eat? Depends, right? There's when it comes to liquids, the liquid measurement is a cheekful. Right? It's not measured in volume. It's not measured in a uniform volume according to one single measurement, but rather it goes according to a cheekful's worth of liquid. Right? So that's why you may see people when they drink, they sort of go like that just to see how much is in there. Once you've drunk a cheeksful, once you've drunk, I'm trying to get this out without stumbling over it. Once you've drunk a cheeksful's worth of liquid, you then have to make an after blessing over it. And of course, there was something important that I wanted to say as I was trying to get cheeks full out, and now I've forgotten it. Revis is something else. It's called Meloi Lugmav. Right, and again, each person has got their own cheek. Oh, yeah. Hold on a second. Right, I've got to say this whilst I remember, and then I'll take the questions. Until what point do you have to make your after bracha? So, if you've eaten or drunk something which was a shahakol, you've got half an hour after you finish eating or drinking to be able to make your after blessing. If you've eaten mazonos, then you've got 45 minutes within which to make your after blessing. The answer, the reason is simply because under normal circumstances, mazonos is more filling than shahakol foodstuffs, and you're satiated for longer. Therefore, the whole time that you're still feeling full, you can make the blessing. If you've washed and you've eaten bread, you've got 72 minutes within which to be able to bench afterwards. Now, you may notice by some people when you go around to their houses on Shabbos, if the Shabbos Suda is stretching on, it's taking a long time, they're having a good time, there's lots of divrei Torah that are being said, and there's lots of beautiful zmiras that are being sung. You may see that sometimes people are nibbling on things, right? The minute you nibble on something, you've just extended your 72-minute allowance, right, to be able to bench. Which means, when's it come? Not from when you began, from when you end, right? Which means that you have the meal. Let's say you start the meal at 6 o'clock in the evening, and you finish eating at 6:30. So then you've got 72 minutes to bench inside of that. If at any point within the 72 minutes you eat on anything, whatever it is, but maybe it's just a peanut, whatever it is, that now extends your 72-minute period to be able to bench another 72 minutes after that. Yes?
So technically, I could make a motzi at breakfast.
Yes.
And just every 71 minutes eat something.
Yes.
And then just go and then bench after dinner.
Yes.
Without making another motzi.
It's possible to be able to do that. I'm not sure how anyone would be able to go 71 minutes without eating. That's that's really not a Jewish thing to do. You know that.
It has to be done in the same table.
Oh, so there's an Indian over here, right? That it needs to be in the same place, right? Which means that I guess you're stuck in the dining room.
Oh no! So not only are you perpetually eating, but you're also not moving. Okay.
And you're also in the yeshiva dining room, which
what
is...
would corn soy patty be? Would that be shahakol or...
a corn soy patty.
The ones they have for lunch?
Yeah.
It's like a breaded, it's got soy in it, and then it's got bits of corn.
Yeah. You say shahakol over there.
When you bite into it though, then you can see corn.
Yeah.
So when it's served to you, you can't see it, but when you eat it, it's recognizable.
You got whole bits of corn in there.
Whole bits.
Whole.
What I would suggest is like this. I would suggest that you eat something which is hardoma together with the patty. in order to be sure that you have to make a hadama. I'm not 100% sure you have to make a hadama over the corn that's in that patty. But if you have let's say you have a tomato together with it, then you're just taking care of the problem.
Okay, and I think you probably went over this, but what's like the hierarchy of, like, what's the most important?
Blessings?
Yes, to do.
So hamoitzi, it doesn't work like that, which means that you got to make a blessing over what you're eating.
Yeah, but like if you have two things, what's most important?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, good. No, that's a good. We didn't go through that. That's good. That's a good question, right? What about when you've got on your plate, you've got a whole bunch of different things. What are you supposed to be making a blessing over? So working on the premise that you did not wash, right? Because once you've washed, you've taken care of everything that's on your plate. You've got some. Let's say you've got some couscous on your plate or some pasta on your plate, and you've got vegetables on your plate, and you've got some I don't know, meat on your plate. So you would need to make 3 different brachas over there, and you would make them normally according to the level of the importance of the bracha. Mazonis is the most important bracha out of the 3. So you would say a bori minei mazonis over the couscous. You would then make a bori pri adama over the vegetables, and then you would make a shehakol over the meat or the fish or the chicken or whatever it is. However, there is a little bit of a room for maneuverability over here. If you really are not the least bit interested in the other stuff that's on your plate, you just want that steak. Right? You are an honest to goodness red-blooded carnivore, right? And you don't care about the other stuff that's there. You may eat it after you've had your steak, but that's only because it's there, right? Not because you particularly want it. Then you should make a shahakal over the steak because that's the most important thing that's there for you.
Are you saying intent has predominance?
Not just intent, indoors as well. You don't have to be in a tent to. Again, it's a little bit subjective, right? And I think for most people it's not like that. Which means even when the steak is the thing that you've got your eye on the plate, you know you're going to eat everything else as well. At that point, you have to make the brachas according to their order, right? Mazonos, hadama, shakol. But if there are people that they really don't care about the other stuff at all. And once they've had their steak, if they're still hungry, so maybe they'll take, maybe they will eat the couscous, or maybe they will eat the vegetables that are together with it. If that's the case, then you would make a shahakal over the steak, and you would worry about the other stuff afterwards when you get to it, if you get to it.
You just spoke about a regular plate of food. If somebody throws in an apple, I guess the apple goes before Adama, right?
The apple would go before ha'adama, yeah. Bori Priya 8. So you would go Mazonas 8, Adama. Here, I'm trying to think, what do people cook with? What fruits do people cook with? Maybe onions. Apples, maybe?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Onions.
Tomatoes.
Did you just say onions? That's really sad.
Wait,
Onions are vegetables.
Olives.
Olives.
Talking
Oh.
about fruits? What defines a vegetable?
Look around the room. What's that?
In Judaism, it's what comes out of the ground, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. What comes out of the ground?
Vegetable is such like a made-up term. In America, because people say like, fruit just has a seed, except for strawberries.
And cucumbers.
They all have seeds.
And cucumbers.
They all have seeds.
And tomatoes.
Is vegetable.
Yes. The truth of the matter is that I think that nutritionally, I think tomatoes are closer to being fruits than they are vegetables. But we look at them as being vegetables. The broccoli you make over a tomato is Bori Priya Adama.
What about avocados?
Avocados also. Interesting. Avocados are also Bori Priya Adama, I believe. Is that right? 8. It grows in a tree and it's got a pit in the middle. Wait a second. What kind of trees are avocado trees? Do they fit into any of that?
I assume avocados and 8s. I truly have.
It's a
I've
tree.
never seen it.
It's
Never seen
literally-
avocado tree.
I've seen avocado farms in California.
Yeah, they're on
definitely
trees.
But you've also probably seen banana plantations, right? And they're also trees, but they're not.
No, avocado trees are like solid trees.
They're trees. Yeah. Okay. But I apologise for my relationship with avocados begins in the supermarket.
You see a lot of trees in California.
Ah, yeah. That's great. So I mean, here in Jerusalem, you see a lot of supermarkets, and they have avocados in them, but they don't come on their trees. They're just lying there. So that would be Bori Priya 8, right? Very good. Here, good. Okay, let's go. You've got on your plate. That's going to be, and you mentioned olives, right? You've got a selection of Bori Priya 8s as well. So let's turn this into something which we can work out. There's a few things we can learn over here. So the bracha of Boim and Emazonis is the first thing you're going to say. Then you're going to say the Bori Priya Eitz. Then you're going to say the Bori Priya Doma. Then you're going to say the Shahako. But let's say, for example, you've got in the Bori Priya Eitz, you've got bits of avocado and you've got whole olives. So you make the bracha over the whole olive. Again, we're back to the halacha of if something is whole, then it's got more importance than something that's been cut up, and you should make the bracha over that instead. By the way, that's the same is true also for bread, right? If you've got the opportunity of making a hamoitzi lechem in haaretz over a whole piece of, whatever it is, not piece of bread doesn't make any sense, but like a whole roll or a whole pita or even a whole challah, that's a preferable thing to do. So, for example, you could go to a wedding. And they have these enormous challahs in the weddings. They're called wedding challahs. They're like this big, right? The problem is that very often when these things are brought to the table, so they sag. They're so heavy. They're holding him in the middle, and the whole thing's bending like that. And a crack very often appears down the challah. And if that's the case, then the person making hamoitzi, normally it's the chatan, normally the groom is making hamoitzi. He should make hamoitzi over a small roll rather than over something which has got a crack inside of it.
On top?
No, not necessarily. I mean, if he wants to do it for the photos, he could do that. It's only on Shabbos and Yom Tov that we're concerned about having two, like what's called lechem mishnah, to be able to make the bracha make the bracha of hamoitzi. That's got nothing to do with eating the bread itself. That's to do with the manna that was delivered every erev Shabbos. It came as a double portion. There is an interesting machloikis amongst the early authorities about whether the manna was delivered double portion on erev Yom Tov as well. So on erev Yom Tov we do have two. On Yom Tov we do have two challahs, right? We do the same thing as we do on Shabbos, but nevertheless there is a whole discussion over there about whether that was the way it was delivered. It wasn't the way it was delivered because obviously there's less problems with preparing food on Yom Tov than there is on Shabbos, and whatever. But during the rest of the week you don't have to have two.
Rabbi, what about when you're making a bracha of hamoitzi of the lechem mishnah? Why is it that you take the top one, you put it one on top of the other.
Yeah.
And you use the bottom one
at night. And the
other
top one in the day.
Why is that?
Mr. Brewer says that it's Kabbalistic. He doesn't explain, and I don't really understand either. I mean, no, that's not true. Of course I understand, but you people are too puny for me to reveal this to you. When you make hamoitzi on Friday night, right, you're supposed to place the challah that you're not using on top. That's not true. The challah that you're not going to cut first. You're supposed to place it on top of the challah that you are going to cut first. You're supposed to have the challah that you're going to cut first pushing out a little bit so it's closer to you. And then you're supposed to pick the whole thing up and make the blessing of it. One of the reasons why we put them one on top of the other is to make it easy. Your 10 hands are supposed to be touching the challah when you make the bracha. You're not, you know what? I can say whatever I want and nobody really cares. You do not have 10 hands, right? If anybody here is a Buddha, I apologize for what I just said, but as a rule, right, you do not have 10 hands. We have 10 fingers. If you do not have 10 fingers, I do not want to know about it. I really don't, especially if you've got more than 10. That's not something that we want to talk about right now. Stop it. On Shabbos morning, you reverse the process, which is on Shabbos morning, the challah that's going to be used first is the one that goes up, and the challah that's not going to be cut straight away is the one that's left at the bottom, and the challah that's going to be used first is the one that pushes out a little bit and is closer to you, right? So that's what you're supposed to do when it comes. Why is that? I don't know. Don't ask me. Ask Rabbi Orman or ask Rabbi Gottlieb or something. It sounds like a sort of like a da 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 kind of thing to ask. That's what I think.
If there are two, and one of them...
There's only one Lauffer, and that's me, but yes.
But one's not whole. One has some imperfection, a crack from, whatever. That can't go on top.
You have to make the bracha over the whole one, even if it's not the one that you wanted to make the bracha over.
Okay.
Right, again, we're back to, there's the concept of something which is whole has got a halachic significance to it that something which is not whole does not have. Yes?
Let's say that you don't have challah.
Yes.
Can you make it over normal bread?
Yes. Challah, of course, is delicious, but it's not, you don't have to eat challah on Shabbos. You can make hamoitzi over anything. I mean, anything that you make a motzi over. Obviously, you can't make a motzi over two tomatoes. That's not acceptable. But you can make a motzi over pita, and you can make a motzi over the Iraqi, what's called Lauffer, and you can make it over rolls, and you can make it over matzah. If you're not Sfardim, for the Sfardim it's a problem. Right? Sfardim make a mazonis over matzah, but if you're I'm trying other bread stuff. What? Crackers are a problem because they're not bread, right? It's got to be hamotzi. Italian bread, French baguettes. You make hamotzi over as well. Of course, your
French baguettes in England.
Huh?
How do they say French baguettes in England?
Good question. Under the counter. They sell them under the counter. People come in and they say, I want a baguette. Get it out. They wrap it up in brown bags, and you have to walk out of there with this thing sticking up like that.
They write whiskey on it.
Good, okay. Somebody was listening. Okay. Again, it doesn't have to be challah. It can be anything, right? So long as it's whole. Can you make hamotzi over a regular, loaf of bread that you bought in the makolet? Yes, you can. B'shas atchak, if there's no other alternative, can you make hamotzi over sliced bread? Yes. If there's no other alternative, then that's what you have to do. It's not optimal. It really isn't. Yeah.
How much should you exhaust yourself to find whole bread before resorting to sliced bread?
Completely and absolutely, until you have not an ounce of energy left inside of you.
That's good, because that's what happened.
I mean, again, that's not something which can be measured, I think, in halachic terms. You should do your best to try to have regular bread. If you don't, you don't. Right? If you've only got sliced bread, then that's what you're going to have to use. Right? It's important to make a motzi on Shabbos. It's important to make a motzi 3 times on Shabbos. Right? So, yeah.
How about if you don't have 2 pieces of bread?
So make a motzi over 1.
Can you cut it into 2 pieces?
Is it a slice?
No, like it's like a baguette.
No, then it's better to keep it whole, and not to have 2, rather than to cut it into 2 and to have 2 halves.
What if it's 2 pieces of baguette that are easily falling apart? Would that work?
Okay, run it past me again.
There are 2 pieces of baguette. But
Yeah.
they're kind of connected to each other at a small piece, meaning they can break apart easily.
The emphasis is I don't think one is any better than the other, right? Which means that the one piece that's just barely attached that's not a whole piece of bread anyway, right? Halachically, it's not a whole piece of bread. If you break it in half and now you've got 2, you know what? Maybe that's better for Shabbos, that you should have some kind of a remembrance that you're supposed to have 2. But l'maisa, you're not really doing anything. Right, it's what's called b'di eved, b'di avad. Right, you're doing it. It's de facto. You're stuck. There's no other alternative.
So what if you don't have access to a whole piece of bread, like a whole loaf? What if you only have what if it's Shabbos, you're in the middle of nowhere, you don't have any neighbors, and you go to your bread?
Well, you might have neighbors. They may not like you.
Exactly.
Well, why do you have to go to such an unlikely scenario of not having neighbors when you could use a much more likely scenario? Listen, again, b'di eved, you should use whatever there is, right? Which means that if all you've got is like a half a loaf of bread or something, so use a half a loaf of bread to make hamotzi over. What do you do if you don't have any bread at all? So that's a problem. You can't fulfill the mitzvah of making hamotzi on Shabbos. That's all. It's not,
You do it with babka? Like if you have a big loaf of babka, you don't have any bread?
Babka's a problem, right? Even though the yeast that it's made out of is exactly the same kind of yeast that people make bread from, it's been turned into a mazonis. Now, if you're gonna eat enough of it, if you're gonna finish the whole thing up, then maybe it's okay then to make hamotzi over it and to eat it and then to bench afterwards. Maybe that would be the right thing to do.
Isn't wheat the deciding factor? I mean, is it?
It's like we spoke about the other day. You know what changes bread from being hamotzi lechem min haaretz into something which is mazonos? It's got the wheat factor's got a lot to do with it. How much flour is in there, that's for sure. But it's also to do with the other ingredients as well.
What about somebody who has like celiac disease and they're allergic?
Yeah, so we spoke about that the other day. If there are certain flours which can be used, which are part of the 5 grains that you can make hamoitzi over, which are people who are gluten intolerant can eat them. Spelt is one of them. Might be the only one actually, no? Does anyone know this stuff? I don't know. But that's okay, then you can make hamoitzi over that. Otherwise, you won't make hamoitzi. If it's not possible, it's not possible.
On Shabbos, you have to have 3 hamitzis.
You're supposed to have three meals, and you're supposed to have 3 hamoitzis.
Now in the winter time, you finish, you daven. It's a long davening, and 2:00, 2:30, you start first eating lunch.
Yeah.
So that's your second hamitzah.
Yeah.
And it extends it to almost a half an hour before
Yeah.
the shoes. Will you make a wash again?
What you have to do is like this. You can, in theory, you can wash. You can begin your Suda. You can bench, make a break, and then wash again and continue the Suda.
How long of a break do you need?
How long of a break do you need? So according to most opinions, you need a break of about a half an hour. So what sometimes people do is that they'll go daven mincha and then they'll come back, or you go for a walk around a little bit and then come back. You should not be sitting at the table waiting for the half an hour to finish. You're supposed to get up and do something. Right, to make a very obvious break between what you've just done and what you're going to do. The best thing to do, if it's possible, is to daven mincha, because to be able to eat sudash lishit lechatchila in the best possible way, you need to eat it after you've daven mincha. So again, if you've got, sometimes it works out like that it's possible to do that. Sometimes, people, when they make kiddushim after shul in the morning, if there's been some kind of a simcha inside of the shul, so when it's especially in the winter, when there's a very limited amount of time, very often they'll put out rolls, and if people want to turn that kiddush into a suda, they can do that, right? And then they can go daven mincha, and they can eat their next meal afterwards, and then they've taken care of the 3 meals that need to be eaten on Shabbos. Yeah?
Something different in time evolving between making a blessing and ingesting the food that you made the blessing over. Is there
under normal circumstances, it needs to be pretty much immediate. One of the halachas is that when you make a blessing over food, you're supposed to be holding the food. There shouldn't be a gap between what you've just said and what you're about to do. About the only time that it's not like that normally is when you wash for hamoitzi, and then you've got a whole bunch of people and you're waiting for somebody to make the blessing over the bread, and then you've got to wait. And so we spoke about the other day, you've got to be careful about not allowing your mind to wander from the fact that you're in the middle of this mitzvah right now. But under normal circumstances, when you come to make a bracha, there shouldn't be more than the amount of time that it takes to say Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, right? Which is, we're talking about, a couple of seconds. That's really all it is. Again, under normal circumstances, that's perfectly okay. It's perfectly normal. It's not like there's nothing difficult about holding an apple, making a bori priya eitz, and beginning to eat it straight away.
That's what I was actually getting at. Because you might have a problem with there. Most fruits today are infested to some degree. And the way you make sure that you're not having...
So here, what are you supposed to do? It's an interesting question, right? Because on the one hand, you're supposed to make a bracha over a whole piece of fruit. On the other hand, if you're eating fruit which tends to be buggy, then you need to check it before you make a bracha. Which means that, let's say, I don't know, for example, apples are probably not such a great example, because the dates, right? Dates are pretty bad. I'm sure you've been on plenty of them yourselves that have been real, never got you anywhere. Dates have bug problems. Now, what you should take the date and you should make the bori priya eitz over it, and you should eat it straight away, right? But you're supposed to first open it up, check to make sure there's nothing wriggling around inside, and then make the bori priya eitz and then eat it, rather than the other way round.
So that's an exception. That you cannot go to whole on the date. You got to open it up. You say you should go first, try to make a bracha of something whole.
Yeah, but if you can't, then you can't, right? Which means the only thing that's sitting on the table right now are dates. Then you need to open up the date and have a look to make sure that it's okay. Date, again, you just hold it up to the light. You'll see what's going on over there. Actually, now that I think about it, that's pretty much the same analogy with the date that you go on. If you just hold the date up to the light, you'll see that it's probably full of worms and not the kind of thing that you want to do again. Right? There are certain fruits, certain vegetables which are known to be infested all leafy vegetables are a problem. Here, spinach. I mean, all leafy vegetables, lettuce, spinach. Some of them are appalling. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. These are things that are absolutely infested with bugs. Here in Israel, they came up with an invention which has been absolutely fantastic. I remember as a kid, lettuce eating was, we didn't get to eat lettuce very often because it had to be checked. And all the lettuce had to be washed and it had to be held up to the light. And by the time you did all of that, I mean, it's only a vegetable, for goodness sakes. If we had to do this to eat steak, I could understand why we're doing it. But for a piece of lettuce, so forget it. But over here, in a place called Gush Katif, which unfortunately was given to the Arabs, the agriculture over there came up with a method of raising bugless leafy vegetables. They're actually grown above ground. And they use hydroponics over there, and it's incredible because this stuff comes. It's now, Baruch Hashem, it's readily available everywhere, and you buy this stuff. It's just fantastic. You just have to wash off the sand, but you don't have to worry there are no bugs in these things. In America, there are certain companies like Eden and Bodek who supply bug-free cauliflower, broccoli, all those kinds of things. They are frozen. I'm not sure whether you can get fresh produce in America. Over here in Israel, every now and then they do supply. Gush Katif does supply things like fresh broccoli, corn. Corn on the cob is a problem. Corn on the cob is normally full of bugs, right?
So why would they sell it?
Huh?
Why would they sell it?
Depends who's selling what, right? Which means that you can buy frozen corn on the cob over here that is bug-free. Again, it's been raised by Gush Katif. Very rarely you can buy fresh corn on the cob that's from Gush Katif, which is bug-free. What?
Did they make a new one after they redid Gaza?
Yeah, they took all of the. I mean, it's just know-how. It's not. It didn't really matter where it was.
Yeah.
They've re-established themselves in different places in the country, and that's like this stuff is all available. Every now and then you can get fresh corn on the cob, which is bug-free. But you should avoid things like fresh corn on the cob that doesn't come with some kind of a kashrus symbol, fresh broccoli, fresh cauliflower. These things are really problematic. Huh?
So is the catcher on the corn?
Say again, what?
So is it going to be on the corn? You're going to look for the...
No, normally it will come inside of a package, right? There'll be like 3 of them together with a label stuck on the top of it saying that it's okay. It's just something to be concerned about. It really is. There are certain fruits that are known to be problematic, so you need to just check them. That's all.
Rabbi Lauffer, with was it 5775 Shemitah, and the way hydroponics works, and I know they not only off the ground, but there's a barrier.
Yeah.
Halachically,
this stuff is actually okay because it's not grown in the ground. Again, we've got to be careful about where you're buying it, what you're buying. But in theory, it's possible to raise. Not everything can be raised like this, but all kinds of vegetables can be raised like that. And if you were doing that, you'd be able to eat this stuff. 7 years in 7. Well, you wouldn't have to make a break because of Shemitah because it's not growing out of the ground.
What's the bracha on it?
Oh.
Interesting. It's Borei Pri Adama, right? Why is it Borei Pri Adama? That needs to be looked into. I never thought about it.
Raised in the solution.
Yeah. You know what? Good. So, it's a kasha. I need to look into it. Okay, Rabbi, we're going to stop over. I just have a little announcement to make, which is going to warm the cockles of your heart. Including from tomorrow and the rest of next week, I'm not going to be here.
What? Oh, come on.
These cockles are
not
cold.
yet.
It's a little early for April Fools.
Yeah, do that to us.
No, it's never too early for April Fools. It's not true.